So I just have a few questions to start, and then we can get into the submitted questions. But I was wondering, just by looking at your website, I noticed that there's been a noticeable progression from when you first started shows in college in your undergrad to now. So I was just wondering, like, how did you get to where you are today in that progression? And is it just like based on your interests changing, or what exactly it was that striked the inspiration?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so much has changed. So I took 3 years before I started my MFA program, and I worked during that time. And from my from my work starting in undergrad and the beginning of undergrad to the end of undergrad, there was a drastic shift as well. I remember I used to think that I had to be a painter, or I had to draw well, or I had to do this, or I had to do that. And I felt weirdly boxed in until I took my first sculpture class and I realized that I wasn't really boxed in. It was just that I thought three-dimensionally, and I was trying to apply those three-dimensional ideas to two-dimensional surfaces. And that clearly was not going to work. So it just something clicked there that changed everything to my senior year with this massive installation. And then during the 3 years I wasn't in school and I was working, I was lucky enough to work for my undergrad, and I was working as a gallery preparator. So I was still within the arts, I was able to maintain my mentors, I was able to maintain creative space. I had studio space, and really that time for me was about exploration. And do I want this? Do I want an art practice? What does my art practice look like? Where do I go from here, right? And I think there was a shift in my mentality because there were things I always had wanted to do, but just wasn't doing for some reason. There was something holding me back, and it was fear-based for sure. It was this deep anxiety that I kind of had held on to from childhood. And I had this urge to take things apart since I was very young. And when you're very young, and especially when you're a young girl, and you start taking apart electronics without asking your parents, you get in trouble. To say that's not safe. Oh, don't do that. I remember trying to take apart this like screen learning toy or something. Like I just desperately wanted to see how it worked, right? And I got in so much trouble. And still to this day, I think if I was a boy, they would have been like, oh, he's going to be an engineer. Like they would have supported that wholeheartedly, right? But that wasn't the case. And I felt really shut down. And I didn't really revisit that until these 3 years after undergrad, when I realized I'm a grown-ass woman, and if I want to go to the store and buy some weird robot toys and rip them apart and resolder them back together with hot glue and just experiment, I can do that, right? And I think the shift was letting go of that fear and letting go of that, no, you're not supposed to do that, and really embracing just doing and acting on instinct and having that feeling and trusting it, saying like, I see this object, I want to modify it, and just rolling with it, not questioning it. And I think that was like the major shift, really, or the inspiration, if you want to call it that, was, yeah.
That is so cool. I was particularly drawn to the more recent installment, which I thought was like, I was mind blown. I was like, wow, this is like STEM and art all mixed together. And it was the coolest thing ever. So you mentioned a little bit just now about how like when you were younger, you couldn't really do all the things you can do now. So my question is like, would you give your younger artist self any advice? And if so, what would it be? And when would it be? Like, when did you most need it?
I, oof, that's a good one. I think as I got older, so I was, even when I was young, even though they told me not to take things apart, they were still very like, oh, this is the creative child. I have two sisters. And I was like, you're the artist child. And they would always introduce me as the artist. And like my great grandfather was an artist, and I really looked up to him. And so it was like an important thing that I was carrying, I felt like, and it felt like a big responsibility. And at a certain point when I was a teenager, I think I let that weight really get to me. Like I felt this immense pressure that I was putting on myself, or making bigger, like the light pressure that I really got from my family about it, and like taking it on too much. And And I think about my third high school. So my dad was in the Army for 20 years and we moved everywhere all over the world. And my third high school, I remember I didn't take an art class because per their curriculum, I had already fulfilled all the arts requirements in my other two schools. And we were looking at applying to colleges and, all this stuff. It's like my junior year, senior year. And I was like questioning. I thought, am I really an artist? Like, I don't really do traditional work at home. I don't paint and draw at home for fun or anything. I've been doing a lot of project-based work my whole life and I'm the artist child, but like, what does that mean? Like, am I truly, I didn't know what an artist was at that point. And I think if I were to be able to talk to my high school self and like reassure her that the crazy things she was thinking of were really actually art and were achievable, and I didn't have to be boxed into this specific project-based work, I think I would have felt like less pressure, to just make what I'm feeling and not thinking I shouldn't make this because it's not going to be good enough or I don't know how to do that. I was always very focused on, I don't know how to do that, so I shouldn't do it or I can't do it. And that's just totally not true. And that's something that I definitely don't feel today. I think I learn new things every day. And if you think you know everything, or if you think you need to know everything right off the bat, you'll never learn. And you'll be learning your whole life. Like, I'm acquiring new skills for my artistic practice every single day. And yeah, I would really just like to relieve my younger self of that pressure to be a certain kind of idea of whatever my kid self thought an artist was, because it wasn't true. It really wasn't.
That is awesome. This idea of constantly evolving into a better artist and a more knowledgeable artist, because I feel like that's applicable to everything that we do. Were there any resources, or what was that? Sorry.
No right way to do that. Like,
exactly.
There's so many paths.
Exactly. Yes. So speaking of paths, were there any resources or spaces or specific classes that you felt just developed that and kind of made it clear what you wanted to do for you?
Yeah. I was always in art classes when I could be in whatever school I was when I was younger, and those were fine. And again, I was doing project-based work. I really liked it. I liked being creative. I liked being the artsy kid, whatever. But when I got to college, I came in. So by that point, I let the pressure get to me and I was like, I don't have a portfolio. I'm not going to apply to art school for college. Like, I'm not an artist. I don't know what that looks like. So I went to Gettysburg College with David, and I entered that liberal arts curriculum thinking, I want to be more well-rounded. I want to explore. I want the opportunity to look at all different kinds of subjects, including art, and then decide what I want to be and what I want to do. And so I came in as a psych major, which is really funny to me now. I'm still fascinated by those kinds of things, and that's a huge part of my practice, of course. But then I switched to a sociology major, and I had an art minor. And then I completed so many art classes. I basically finished my art minor by sophomore year-ish. Wow. And realized I can't escape it. Like, I can't, like, art just bled through my life. And I switched over to an art major. But it was not the traditional arts courses that I was taking that were the most helpful to me or the most impactful for my practice today. Like, looking back, it was definitely the sociology courses, the inequalities courses, the women, gender, sexuality studies courses, all of these interdisciplinary things that were examining people and humans and the way we live and the way we conduct ourselves and the way we interact with each other in the world around us, and the way we exist in different cultures. Those are what was really impactful and informative. And in my grad program right now, I think I'm surrounded with a lot of people that came straight from art school to here, and they know instinctually a lot of the why not? Like, why don't I make this? Why not? Why shouldn't I? And I know a lot of the why, like why I am and why I should be. And why it's important and how I dissect this and how it intersects with other subjects and why it's impactful. And I'm really grateful for that. I think all of those things were so informative. So I came out to clarify, I came out with a studio art major and a double minor in sociology and women, gender, sexuality studies. And I think that that has prepared me to really formulate a serious practice in a way that just taking studio courses or going straight into art school would not have done for me.
That is amazing. And I think it's true. Art is interdisciplinary everywhere. And I think it's awesome that you kind of started in this way that led you to where you ended up. This idea that like, if you didn't start as a psych major, maybe you would have done art, but you wouldn't have done sociology and women's studies. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Definitely.
So speaking of classes and what exactly you took, were there any classes or resources that you wished were available sooner along your journey?
Facilities, like really professional facilities. Like I'm in a grad program. I mean, a lot of people go to grad school for resources, for extra facilities, for more advanced technologies to work with. So I'm in the Art and Technology Studies department, and we have access to an EK lab, which is the Electronics Kinetics lab that has all sorts of electronic resources and junk and things that we can take apart and put together and like reuse as a resource for our work, including tech and staff and people that can help us. The IO lab, which is a lot of our 3D printing. We have 3D printers that are just for our department that we have access to.
Awesome.
There's VR technology. There's, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. There's like projection. There's anything you can think of, you can do. Like everyone's doing something. And I wish I had had that. I wish I had had that formal, like, here's how do you make a circuit and here's how you do this and here's how you do that. Because the traditional foundational medium work is very important. And I'm really grateful for that as well. But I think I've always had these particular interests. And I think maybe if I had been exposed to them a little earlier, I wouldn't, I could have been a little further by now. I don't regret my path, but there's always things that I wish I had had earlier, because sometimes, especially when it comes to coding and whatnot, I feel behind. It's already a boys' club, and the boys always get started earlier than the girls for some reason, for reasons. But yeah, it's hard to think maybe I'm playing catch up sometimes. I know this is the right move and all the timing was the right timing for me, but I definitely wish I had a little bit more like formal electronics or coding education early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. This idea of like having all the resources at your fingertips like that, just to sort of, play around with what's going on and experiment. That's awesome. So on that, is resources and facilities like that, is that a big reason that you decided to take your education a step further, or was it a mix of that and other things?
Yeah, I think that's one of quite a few reasons I decided to go. And others is, I had been pushing myself for the 3 years to see if I really wanted to do it. And I was ready to be pushed by others. I was ready for more support. I was ready for more challenges. I was ready for other people to be looking at my work 24/7 and identifying things that I could never have thought of, or I never would have identified on my own. A lot of your work as an artist is just you by yourself working in your studio, and you get desensitized to a lot of what you're doing, and there's things that you miss, and having different perspectives and different professionals and different voices chiming in on your work is super important and super valuable. Like, people are a resource. There is no guarantee that you will go out into the world and people will be willing to look at your work and discuss it seriously and help you push it. And even now, a lot of it's up to me to push myself still, of course. If you're not busy in grad school, that's on you. You don't have to be busy in grad school, but you should be. You should be taking on every opportunity that you can and working with as many people as possible, which brings me to collaboration as well. Just being around a community of artists within my grad cohort and working on projects with them and learning from them, my peers, is extremely valuable. Like I was just thinking about this today, actually this morning. I've just had so much gratitude lately. I've just felt so much gratitude because I don't think I've ever been in a place in my life where there's so many, just not only just talented, creative individuals around me, but people who are like, how can I support you? How can I help you creatively? Like, you're struggling, and I recognize that because I struggle in my practice too. How can I help you? And that's incredibly valuable. That's a huge resource. Again, if you're out of an institutional setting, there's never a guarantee that people will come to support you and come to work. And out of an institutional setting, it's up to you to establish that community. And being within here now and having these connections to my cohort now, I think is going to change my life for the better.
That is incredible. Yes. So speaking on that, this idea, this decision to further your education, just for the opportunity to collaborate and for the opportunity to have all of these advisors and the facilities. Is there any advice you would give to high schoolers, middle schoolers, bachelor students that are working to find those communities, to find those spaces? Are there any, do you have any advice on like where they can get a head start on that, just as young as they are?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I'd say do what you want to do, because there's probably a practice that reflects what you want to do that you've never even witnessed before. And just trust yourself and trust your instincts and trust what you want to do creatively can work for you and can evolve and change. The more work you're making and the more mistakes you're making, the more bad work you're making, the more good work will come from it. But also, one thing I've really learned is vulnerability, just the willingness to go 100,000% beyond your comfort zone, to share yourself fully and completely and share your practice and your motivations and your background, because all of that comes into play with the work you're making, whether other people see it or not. And the only way they're going to see it is if you reveal that to them. And the deepest connections and the best collaborations you're going to have, and even the best networking opportunities you're going to have in the art world, or if you're being 100% vulnerable and honest with people, because it's all about human connection. And when you find people who are also willing to do that, that's your community, right? You will always find your community. You will find people who match your energy, and do not waste your time on people who are not willing to go there. Do not waste your time waiting on somebody to catch up to you like that. Just always move forward, and you will stay true to yourself and exactly what you want to do with your practice, and you will find your people.
That's great. Thank you. Speaking about advice, we have a few submitted questions from contributors to the Gaia Zine. So just as you were saying, putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, and that's how you're sort of going to get that positive feedback. One contributor asked, what is the best way to get your work out there?
Oh my gosh, that's so different for so many people, right? Because like some people's practices translate super well to social media, super well to Instagram. And there's some mediums I work with that dominate my Instagram because they contribute to that really easily. But I think the best way across all is to talk to people and to get out there and to be at events and to be at shows and to be within the community that you want to be in and be an active participant in that, because it's talking to people. It's talking to people that's going to get it out there. Like social media, sure, definitely you should be using it as a way to document your work. You can use it as a way to reflect on your progress. You can use it as a way to make connections collaboratively as well. Like that's a good opportunity. But it's really about getting out there and pushing yourself and putting yourself in front of people.
Thank you. I completely agree. I think just taking that first step, and hoping that, of course, like you said before, there's going to be a lot of bad before there's good, but you need the bad before the good. So yeah. Just putting yourself out there and being unafraid to create the quote bad. I completely agree. Yeah. So another question, this is like two, so we'll merge them together. but they want to know where you draw your inspiration from. And another person asked if you often find like your mood or your current interest reflected in your work.
I'm sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I don't like to believe in like the spark of inspiration, right? Like you should be at work. You should be working every day. You should not be waiting for that inspiration to hit, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're just in a funk and you've got to work your way through it. I have like an element in my practice that's not as serious, an element that helps me work through the creative process. I do a lot of collaging with these magazines back here that are like simple works, simple creative things that keep the flow going when I'm not sure where I'm at with a bigger, more complex project. But again, a lot of me personally, it's a gut feeling. If I see something and I'm interested in it and it gets my gears going and I like it and I want to work with it, I commit, I do it. Like I buy that weird Furby toy, or I buy this discontinued doll that like caused 911 calls or something. Like I talk to people and I find subjects I'm interested in and I just commit and go for it. Like if you feel something, you should just do it. For me, it's always a gut feeling, I feel like.
That's awesome. Yes. And I'm very interested by the discontinued dolls and the Furbies. Sounds very, very interesting. Yes. I completely forgot about Furbies until you just mentioned them. And I was like, oh, those are a thing that exist.
Yeah.
So our last question that was submitted is, how would you advise going about finding success, however you define it, in a more niche field of work like your own?
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's really hard because success is so subjective, right? Like some artists are craft workers and they feel really successful in honing their craft and selling their work in small batches and having a small business. Like that's success for them. And some artists are very show based, like having lots of shows is what feels successful for them, or getting gallery representation makes them feel successful, or selling their work online in a fine arts way is success, whether that's like really, really big success or really, really, really small, like it's a small scale or a large scale business or something. But I think this comes back to people. It's like finding your people, finding people who appreciate your work and appreciate what you're doing and understand it, right? And understand you in a way and want to share in that. There's always, it's not just about buyers, it's not just about, oh, who wants to buy this? Or is this a marketable product? Or can I sell this? Or can I reproduce this? It's definitely about who cares about it, because not everyone's going to care about your work. Not everyone's going to care about your niche subject. Not everyone's going to care about your eccentric whatever background. It's again about identifying those who appreciate that and want to contribute in that and share in that energy. And you'll find your success, whatever it is that looks like, because it's never one definition. And for me right now, success has been about collaboration and shows and getting the work out there and sharing the ideas with people and generating dialogue. Like none of the work, I don't want to make work that's not generative. I'm very interested in what other people experience from it, what other people have to say, and what other people feel from it, because it starts with me. But when you put it out into the world, it's living its life. It's taking on something and it's going to be what it's meant to be, whether I intended it for it to do that or not. Right? I think that's what I've got for that.
Thank you. I completely agree. I think, like you were saying, success is very subjective and just depending on what you want to do, especially in the art world. I agree that I feel like it really depends on what kind of road you want to take. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. These were really great. I'm really happy to contribute. This is an awesome project that you're on.
And one final question, this is sort of like a wrapping up, but if you were to describe your work and just what you do, how would you do that?
Yeah, So what I'm interested in my practice is really objects. It's objects and the sentimentality and emotions that we can imbue them with, that we put inside them. So not just objects as vessels for those emotions and memories and time and storage like that, but also how objects are conduits for time. They have this ability that allows you to time travel, and it kind of reveals a simultaneity in time that we generally can't comprehend. And it's also just not the way we as humans experience time. Like we are constantly remembering our past and imagining our future in order to formulate our present, and it only goes forward. But I think once you identify whatever is attached to the certain object you're working with, you can really reveal that simultaneity. You can make it present. You can just actually experience it in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Thank you so much. Yes, that is so cool. And I just love how interactive your work is. And it's really inspiring. So thank you so much for being here and answering our questions.